Hey everyone, it's the RHB, and this time I'm going to rank the best Final Fantasy main characters, starting with Final Fantasy 3. This is the worst of the main heroes. Luneth, he's not even really the main hero, he's just kind of by default. He's on the cover of the logo for the Final Fantasy 3, for the Final Fantasy DS version. It's just he doesn't do anything. He's just kind of there. Basically, his story starts off, he falls down a hole, and that's where it goes. There's really no backstory to him. So of all the main stories in Final Fantasy, he was the one that was lowest. The second one I have are in Final Fantasy 1, the Warriors of Light. They don't do anything. They show up. They're the heroes. They do have some pretty cool growth. Their likability is pretty cool because you can actually make them whatever you want. You can make them in any class that's available, and then as the game goes on, they elevate those classes. So that was pretty cool. But I mean, they're important to the story, but they just show up. There's really no depth to their characters. So they were number 12 on my list. Number 11 was this guy right here. However you pronounce his name, it's Bart's, Butts, just depends on the translation. He's just kind of there. He's got he's got a tie to the story because he's the son of one of the heroes of light, but he doesn't really add anything to it. If he wasn't there, it it seems like the story would still go on. Ferris and Reyna, or Lena, however you pronounce the name, depends on which translation you get. They seem to be more of the main heroes. I know he's on the intro, and I know he's the lead character, but he doesn't feel like a lead character. Again, he's just kind of passing through, and he just kind of stumbles into it. But the game itself was pretty cool, but his character was a little bit to be desired. Number 10 on my list, the first real main hero in a Final Fantasy, Furion. I like Furion. I like Final Fantasy 2 more than a lot of other people, but he's still pretty low down the list. I mean, their big story is he's the one that gets put into the lead of your party, and he's there. His parents were killed along with Maria and Guy and Leon. He's got a cool they've got a little bit of a backstory. He's got some good leadership skills. I mean, he just takes his friends and they go kick the Empire's butt and eventually destroy the Emperor. But he doesn't do anything. He's just kind of like there. He doesn't have anything that makes him stand out compared to some of the others. So that's why he's still pretty low on the list. The next one is, if you saw my first video, I ranked Final Fantasy 12 as the one I liked the most. But Vaughn, as the one of the main protagonists in terms of how he ranks with other ones, he's low. He's got that Meg Ryan haircut. He has a little tie to Vayne because his parents were killed by the Empire, but that's not even really Vayne's fault. That was the Empire's fault. So he doesn't have a whole lot to do. I know it starts off with his brother, and he's got the tie with brother, but it felt more like Ash's story. Ash was one of the more main characters because she's trying to reclaim her throne, or even Bosch trying to reclaim his name, showing everyone that he was framed. Balthier even seemed to have be more of the main hero. I know he says it, and he kind of have that Han Solo feel to it. I know a lot of people compare that game to Star Wars and some of the parallels to it, but it is what it is. But he ranked pretty low, even though Final Fantasy 12 I think is one of the better Final Fantasies in the series. He's pretty low. The next one I have, this was one of the bigger letdowns. This probably ranks is a bigger letdown than Final Fantasy 8 following its predecessors, but Lightning was a cool character. There's a lot of good things with Final Fantasy 13. The battle system's cool. The story eventually picks up. The graphics are great. The gameplay is solid. But she as a leader, it's cool that it's a female. It was different. She's got a tie to the main villain. That was one of the things that went into my rankings with the characters. Like, did they have a real tie? It's about her, but she doesn't really grow. She still just has that very cold shoulder attitude throughout the whole game. It was like having Lulu from Final Fantasy X as your main protagonist, and she just didn't seem to grow as much as some of the other ones. Her leadership, she had a cool weapon and all, but again, her biggest tie is that her sister is what she's going after originally. She doesn't. Again, it just seemed more. It didn't seem like it was anyone's story. It was just kind of like, hey, we're gonna pluck these 6 people out, tie them together, and we'll just put this girl as our main protagonist. I know she got the two spin-offs that follow her story or that are really heavily linked to her, but again, as a main protagonist, I don't know, she just was missing something. There's some good parts about her, but she just didn't have that quality of leadership. The next one I've got is Squall. I don't know what in the world was up with this guy. He at times seems pretty cool. He's got a cool weapon. The gun blade is a sweet weapon, but he is a whiny little baby. He's got two girls who basically are head over heels in love with him. Quietus, however you pronounce her name, and Renoa, and he is just an antisocial teenage kid. He's got some leadership skills. He does a little bit of growth throughout the games. He's got good relationships to others. I mean, he was the leader of that group of orphans that eventually take on Ultimecia. But he was about middle of the way in the pack for main Final Fantasy heroes in terms of ranking them. Again, there were some good things about him. He followed orders, but that took away from some of his leadership abilities. He's relatable, which is one of the things I also took into account with my rankings, is you can relate to this guy, but eventually he just didn't have as much growth. You never saw him, openly weep or get real emotional throughout the story, which again was a little bit of a detriment. The next one I have is kind of unusual because this one, it was hard to rank this one because there's really no main character, main protagonist in Final Fantasy VI. I am going to put Terra on that list next because it is her story. She is very important for the first half as you go through the World of Balance. Once it becomes the World of Ruin, it becomes almost like the redemption story of Celis and Edgar trying to lead up. Someone could argue that Edgar is the main protagonist of that story, or even Locke, but Locke doesn't show up in that second half of the game for a long time, and he's in and out a little bit at the beginning. I think that Terra, for as important she was in the first half, and then in the second half, you still got to go find her. The story revolves around her, so that's why I put her as my number 6 overall. Kind of ironic. Final Fantasy VI's main protagonist is ranked number 6. She's got a lot of good character traits for her. She's likable. You feel bad for her because she's trying to find her place in the world, and she's a unique character. She's half human, half Esper. Again, there's a lot of good things about her. She has a lot of personal growth. She learns to love, and she adopts all those little kids and helps out with that. Her origin story was pretty cool. Again, she's a product of an Esper and a human. Again, cool story. Lots of things that went into it. But she ranked up there. Again, you could make the case that there's really no main protagonist in Final Fantasy VI. The next one I've got, number 5 on my list, is Noctis. I went through Final Fantasy 15. I enjoyed it. There's a couple little things about it that I can get into on another video. But Noctis was a great character. Not a lot of personal growth throughout the story. He just kind of seemed the same throughout. He does rise up. His leadership was top notch. He was ranked very high for that. His importance to the story. I mean, without him, you do not have Final Fantasy 6, or I'm sorry, Final Fantasy 15. His relationship to the other characters in the party. I mean, I think it's the best one. It was one of my top 2. It was tied for first in my rankings for that. His origin story, they didn't do as much background story as I wish they could have done with Noctis. I really wish they would have done a little bit more of it, maybe with the DLC that comes out as this year goes on. Maybe they'll get more into it. But Noctis was ranked number 5 out of the Final Fantasy characters. Number 4, I know some people aren't going to like this, but I have Titus. And I know some people are going to say that it wasn't really just his story, it was Yuna's story. Heck, you can make the case it was Auron's story, or like his last chance to, finish what Rosca, and Jex started. But Titus is the main character for, that's debated for another time. His personal growth throughout the story, he's kind of whiny and snivelly, but as he goes along, he just realizes, like, I'm going to do anything. He's got some good leadership skills. I know he kind of follows along, but he does step up. And again, from the fact that, hating his dad, to fighting him, to knowing that, like, he does really love his dad. That's some of the reasons why he ranked up there pretty high. I know he's got the annoying voice at times, but there was a lot of good with him. His relationship to everyone else is important, and he's got one of the cooler origins. Right? He's not even real. He's a dream that eventually, if you go through, spoiler alert, Final Fantasy X-2, he comes back, which is pretty cool. So Titus is up there. Titus, however you pronounce it. I call it Titus. It sounds cooler. He was number 4. Number 3, don't hate me for all the people that got into this got into Final Fantasy because of this fan. Cloud. I rank Cloud high. He has good personal growth, but he's got some similarities to Lightning. He's very just, again, he's a soldier. He doesn't have a lot of expression. I know it's hard to do it without voices and stuff like that to see how much they change as it goes along. But he is the main focus of the game. I mean, you can't have Final Fantasy VII without him. You could have some of the other Final Fantasies you could have without the main character, like case in point, Vaughn. Vaughn doesn't really need to be there for Final Fantasy 12. Cloud needs to be there. He's got a great tie to the villain. They are rivals. It's probably one of the best rivalries between your main protagonist and villain throughout all the Final Fantasies. And Cloud is likable. No way to sugarcoat it. He's a badass, and hopefully they'll do him justice when they remake Final Fantasy VII and start releasing those. I really hope they get the guy that voiced him in Advent Children and any of the other things that they've done where they voiced for Cloud. Again, he's right up there. He's top notch. He's one of the best, but I don't think he's the best. He's one of my favorites. He's top 5 for sure. The next one I've got, number 2, Zidane. There is not a lot to dislike about this guy. I know the hairstyle is about it, looks a little weird, but that's part of the things I enjoyed about Final Fantasy IX. I loved Final Fantasy IX. It's one of my favorites. Top 3, for sure. With Zidane, you cannot have the story without Zidane. He is essential to it, and he's got a great rivalry with him and his brother Kuja. Even more of a rivalry than what Cloud had with Sephiroth. Don't hate me for that. You know it's true. They have a great rivalry once it starts to develop. He has a lot of growth. He's very arrogant as he goes along, but he knows as a good leader, he goes for help. He gets help from others. He delegates tasks, and he's fearless. He does everything. He knows at the end, hey, I got to go save him. Spoiler alert, if you haven't played it, I got to go save Kuja. Even though he's tried to kill us and he's tried to destroy everything, he is a great hero. He's got a lot of growth. His leadership is top-notch. That's why he ranked very, very high. His story's pretty cool. He's similar to Titus, where he's not even real. He's a genome where he's just kind of an empty vessel. So Cloud ranks very, very high in my Final Fantasy characters. He was number 2. Number 1 is Cecil, without a doubt. Of all the Final Fantasy characters, he's got the most personal growth. He basically does a 180. He's a Dark Knight. He becomes a Paladin of Light. His leadership is top notch. He keeps leading that party, no matter what. People die, they move on. He keeps pushing forward. He is the main focus of the story. He is a Lunarian. Golbez, his brother, is one of the main villains, not the main villain. Everyone knows it's Zemus, Romus. You can't have Final Fantasy IV without Cecil. His relatability to the other characters is good. His relationships with the other characters are good because he goes through the games. People will still join him. They sacrifice themselves for him. The twins sacrifice themselves. Tella sacrifices himself. Everyone is willing to step in, lay down in front for Cecil, and he's willing to do the same. Those are the reasons why I think he is the best main hero in Final Fantasy. I'm not ranking these first, but based on my favorites, I'm going through their personal growth throughout the story, their leadership, their importance or ties to the story, their relationship to the other characters within their party, not with all the NPCs, their origin stories, and their overall likability. I mean, there's not a lot to dislike about Cecil, and with any of these characters, there's things you like, there's things you don't like. I